Up next, we've got Jose Torres with the Puerto Rico Opportunity Zone Fund. This is PROZ2. We're pleased to have them presenting it here for our group today. I think this might be the first time you're presenting this to a big group, this OZ Fund 2, Jose. So very pleased that you're here joining us today to present Town Center Palmas and PROZ2. So without further ado, the stage is yours for the next 10 minutes, Jose, if you'd like to dive in.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's great to be back. Obviously, it's been a couple of years since we presented. Our focus was really finishing the investment of Fund 1. So we're here now. We just recently closed our first investor last week. We were going to wait until next year, but the investor was very interested in kickstarting Fund 2. So the presentation here is basically going to be talking a little bit about Fund 2 and the anchor investment that we have, which is Palmas Town Center. So why Fund 2? Basically, Fund 1 was launched in 2019, but we actually did not do our first closing until 2021. A lot of had to do with Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico's legislation of opportunity zones didn't come out until 2020. With that in mind, we were able to bring 9 investors, and we finished doing 5 deals in Puerto Rico, half of it real estate and half of it in operating business. We launched, like I said, Fund 2 last week. Besides talking about the fund, we're going to talk about the general partner group, which now includes one of our anchor investors in Fund 1, who has become a general partner here. We'll talk about Puerto Rico and I heard people talking about how hard it is to do operating businesses in the US. Luckily in Puerto Rico, because 95% of the island is under a qualified opportunity zone designation, that means that doing deals as an operating business is much easier here on the island. And finally, we'll also talk about the project that we're going to be investing the initial capital. So a quick summary on the fund and the fund strategy. We're structured as a traditional private equity fund, meaning that we're going to be investing in multiple assets, both companies and real estate projects. We're going to mix that with the opportunity zone fund legislation. So we are a qualified opportunity fund, and we're going to be targeting about a 3 times multiple during the life of the fund. And that will be a combination of real estate deals, less risky, generating some cash flow, and also operating assets. Like we mentioned, diversified portfolio, renewable energy. We're looking at sustainable businesses in general, real estate and infrastructure. And when we talk about real estate and infrastructure, we're also talking about tourism in Puerto Rico that has some very interesting tax incentives at the local level. We're using the same service providers and partners as we use on Fund 1. JTC Group as our fund administrator, our accounting firm out of Florida, DLA Piper as our legal firm, and a banking institution that focuses on private equity funds, where we will keep any of our money divided in different bank accounts so that all of it is guaranteed. In terms of the actual structure, we are a Delaware partnership. So most people that have invested in private equities and in many other funds understand the Delaware partnership structure fairly straightforward. I would say the other point here is that we're doing this where both US and Puerto Rican investors can invest. In order for the Puerto Rican investors to take advantage of the local Puerto Rico Opportunity Zone legislation, the fund can only invest in Puerto Rico. So this fund, like Fund 1, will only be investing in Puerto Rico qualified opportunity zone businesses and property. Besides myself, the other general partner is Sean Hansen. Like I mentioned, he was a Fund 1 investor. He was the anchor investor in Fund 1. He moved to Puerto Rico a few years ago, and since then we've actually been co-investing. He had his own qualified opportunity fund that he did. When he moved to Puerto Rico, he invested in our fund, and then since then we've been doing deals together. My background has been over 30 years in investment banking and private equity. His background is more running large companies. So we complement each other. He's doing a lot of the advisory work in terms of when we go in and help a company. A lot of the founders need mentoring, so he takes care of that role for the fund as well. quick terms on the fund. Basically, out of this page, what I would highlight is we have $100,000 minimum commitment. We expect to be operating for about 13 years, which would include the 2-year fundraising period that we expect to end towards 2026, and then a 10-year hold period, assuming the last investor comes towards the end of that period. We will have a 2% management fee and a 20% carried interest. I'm not going to talk about opportunity zones because by now I'm sure that everybody has heard. I've heard it in a few of the other presentations. I'll talk a little about Puerto Rico. Basically, for those who don't know Puerto Rico, we're a small island on the Caribbean. We're a Commonwealth of the U.S. We have U.S. law, U.S. currency. Individuals here are U.S. citizens. We don't get to vote in the mainland unless you actually live in the mainland. Besides that, Puerto Rico is a very large economy. It's over $100 billion economy, and we have over 3 million people here on the island. Very well educated, bilingual employment people, and what we do best here is we actually are a great bridge between the U.S. and Latin America, and that's something that's very attractive for companies that are relocating to Puerto Rico. Many of the companies that are relocating to Puerto Rico are actually looking at some of the tax advantages, including opportunity zones. Puerto Rico also have a lot of tax incentives. Almost every project that we will do, if not all of them, will have local tax incentives. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of the tax incentives are a flat income tax rate, most of them as low as 4%. You would have an exemption on municipal taxes, which is very important on construction deals, real estate deals, and you would have an exemption on distributions. So there's no withholding tax on the distributions from those projects. And there's up to 40% tax credit. So when you think about some of the transactions in Puerto Rico, you can get up to 40% of your cap structure, particularly in tourism deals from the government. So let's talk very briefly about the first investment. This is an investment that Fund 1 already invested in, and we're co-GP on this investment. It's a commercial real estate ground-up investment in Palmas Del Mar, which is a community, a resort community in Humacao, Puerto Rico. It's going to be about 67,000 square feet of commercial and retail space. The project is in very late stage development. We're hoping to break ground at the beginning of the year. We have great partners, including JLL, which is basically doing all the leasing and is expecting to operate the shopping center once we are open. The other important things here is we do have a tax decree at the local level that allows us to have exemptions like we mentioned before, which will increase the after-tax return for all of our investors. We expect this to be a 24-month construction, and then we would expect to stabilize it for a year or two and then potentially sell. Here's a structure diagram. It looks a little complex, but what I wanted to show mostly was that we have 3 ways that you can invest in this particular project. You can invest directly, whether you have a QOF or just as an accredited investor. You can invest through PROZ 2. Obviously, when you invest through PROZ 2, you'll be investing in a diversified portfolio. So this will only be part of your overall investment. And we also manage a local private equity fund that provides incentives for Puerto Rican investors. So if there's any Puerto Rican investors on this call, we can talk about the alternative vehicle that provides significant tax incentives to Puerto Rican investors. We have the debt financing lined up. We're in the final stages. We have requested for proposals from general contractors, which are due in the middle of December. And we would expect this project in general to have a 20% IRR. And if we hold it for 4 years, about a 1.8 times multiple. We have a second real estate deal on the opposite side of the island, commercial real estate transaction as well will potentially residential aspect of that. This is being done by our local operating partner, Stella Group, which we did 2 real estate deals on Fund 1. The idea here is that we expect Fund 2 to have also about a 50% real estate, 50% operating business mix. When we look at the rationale for some of these sectors that we're going to go to, is a lot of it having to do with need. In Puerto Rico, there's significant need for infrastructure. And when we talk about that, you have to remember that Puerto Rico has gone through significant natural disasters, including the hurricanes in 2018. There's over $50 billion obligated from the federal government that will go into infrastructure. We don't expect to be necessarily participating in those projects directly. What we expect to be doing is backing companies that will providing services and goods to those projects. In the real estate side, we're looking at low-income housing as well as some luxury homes, given the significant amount of U.S. investors that are moving into Puerto Rico for some of the tax benefits. And finally, when we talked about real estate, we're looking at tourism because there's a lack of hotel room and also there are significant tax incentives. Finally, we're also looking at renewable energy, not just projects, but companies that are providing services and goods to that sector. In particular, Puerto Rico passed a law that requires it to be 100% renewable by 2050. Even if we get to 50% renewable, it'll be a huge amount of capital need. Right now, we're barely at 5%. So Jimmy, those were my prepared remarks. I don't know how I did on time. And here's the contact information for myself and Sean Hansen, both email and cell phones. And anybody's free to call us anytime, not just for fun, but anything that you want to learn about Puerto Rico as well.
Perfect. I've just include a link to your email, info@monllorcapital.com, in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out, ask any questions or request additional information from Jose, please do so. We've got time for one question. I only see one question in the chat at the moment. And then I'm going to cut you loose, Jose, and we'll move on to our next presenter. But Chad asks about the Trump campaign. He wants to know, has the Trump campaign impacted interest in your Puerto Rico fund at all?
Actually, that's an interesting scenario because when you look at what's happening with OC, for everybody's perspective, that's a positive. In terms of what could happen to Puerto Rico from the Trump campaign, there's a lot of negative for what he did when he was here during the last hurricane. But our recent governor-elect is actually a Trump Republican. She used to be in the States as a representative to Congress from Puerto Rico. So there's actually a great relationship from the Republican side with Trump, with the governor-elect. So I don't think that we're going to have a negative side in terms of investments here on the island.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that insight there, Jose. We have run out of time. Thank you again for your continued support of OpportunityZones.com and OZ Pitch Day. It's always great to see you and hear about what you have developing on the island of Puerto Rico. Thank you so much, Jose.
Thank you, Jimmy.